Hello third years, welcome to part 1 of 2 lessons on speech analysis, which is part of a package of lessons looking at analysing and writing speeches, which helps us with loads of literacy outcomes. We are going to focus this lesson on a very famous speech by Emma Watson. You might remember her as Hermione Granger in Harry Potter, and she wrote and delivered a he for she speech in 2014. Before we do anything else with this lesson, what I would like you to do is watch that speech. You should have been given a link, and also read the passage. You could read the passage as you watch the speech. This will take you about 15 minutes, so pause the video, do that now. What we're going to do today then is look at this speech in as much detail as I would expect you to do in S3. Now, these lessons assume that you already have prior knowledge on a lot of RUE techniques, and we're just bringing them all together to focus on a persuasive speech. The first thing we're going to focus on then would be audience and purpose. Now, when thinking about audience and purpose, we must always think about who is the speech person delivering their speech to? Who are they trying to persuade? And what are they trying to persuade them to do? So let's look at this speech again. What I would like you to do is just skim read it again, and you should have already watched it, and start thinking about, well, who is Emma Watson speaking to? And why is she doing this speech? And remember, when you give your answer, you must always give a reason. So for example, Emma Watson aims this speech at men and women. We know this because she addresses men directly, and she also uses personal anecdotes and facts that women could relate to. Now, if we were going to be really specific, we would have examples of those, the quotations, in our answer as well. Her purpose would be to persuade people to join her to end gender inequality. And we know this because she specifies this in her very introductory passage. Let's move on then to thinking about structure. Now, an easy way to work out the structure of a piece and an easy way to consolidate your understanding of a passage is to go through each paragraph and just make a little note about what the main idea is. Once you've written down all the main ideas, then I want you to think about 3 things. Is the opening effective? Are the ideas structured in a coherent way? Is the conclusion effective? Let's look at this opening again. So this opening starts by stating the aim of the campaign, which to me seems like quite an effective way to open a piece because you know immediately what her purpose is. But that would be the kind of bullet point I would be putting next to each paragraph, something really, really short, just to show that you have understood what that paragraph is about. Let's start thinking about the different techniques then. Now, in persuasive writing, there are loads and loads of different techniques that are very, very closely linked to RUE, but not always. So let's look at the first one. The first one is just called the audience, and it's an umbrella term for all the techniques that are used to reel the audience in. So for example, Emma Watson or another speechmaker might directly address the audience. They might use the word you. Now that's really effective because it feels like she's talking just to you, and it makes you notice a bit more and sit up. She might use anecdotes, so personal stories. Now that can be really effective because it humanises a situation, and you don't just think about facts and figures, you actually imagine yourself in that situation too. And sometimes a speechmaker might actually have a plea to the supposed other side. So if they're really trying to reach a group that haven't been reached before, they might actually say, I'm talking to you and I really need your help. And that can be really, really powerful. So let's look at some examples. And this is the kind of thing I would want you to do. So if you look at the first bit that's been highlighted, she uses a statement which creates a serious tone. But right after that, she then gives personal anecdotes. So this gives a personal touch and makes you see her as a human being and not just as someone delivering a speech or as Hermione Granger from Harry Potter. So whenever you're annotating a piece, this is what you would do. You would highlight a technique and you would note down what the technique is, but don't just stop there. Also explain the effect the technique creates. And if you look at this next one, she's directly addressing the audience again. This time she's talking about feminism and she says, if you still hate the word, it is not the word that's important. It's the idea and the ambition behind it. So she is directly addressing those that don't like the word feminism, but she's showing them, from her point of view, that it doesn't actually matter what word we use. The important thing is looking at equality. And here's another one here again. This time she reaches out to the audience again in a really positive way. If you believe in equality, I applaud you. And then she says, we have a uniting movement. So she goes from directly addressing the audience to then bringing the audience in as part of the movement themselves. So it really feels a really inclusive speech, and that can be really persuasive. Let's look now at facts and opinions. And by opinions, we mean using someone else's opinion, not just your own, okay? So we have techniques such as clever use of statistics, projections based on research. So in other words, based on research, in a few years' time, this is where we'll end up if we don't change. And famous quotations showing opinions of really well-respected people. So let's look at some examples just now. So if you see in the first highlight that's been annotated, Emma Watson points out that statistically, suicide is the biggest killer of men between 20 and 49. So she's not just saying, yes, men suffer too. She's actually using a fact to support what she's saying, to prove that everybody is affected by inequality. And then look at this one here. She uses a really famous quotation to illustrate the point that we all have a responsibility to do something. And she illustrates that all that is needed for the forces of evil to triumph is for good men and women to do nothing. So by using that well-known quotation, she's reminding everyone that this is not a new idea, that we should all be trying to do something. This has been spoken about for quite some time. And if you look at here, she uses projections. So these are based on research, although she doesn't explain what her sources are in the speech. But I'm sure if you asked her, she would give you the sources of the information. And she explains that if we don't do anything, the way things are going and the speed of change is that it will be 75 years from 2014 before men and women are paid the same for the same work all the time. Okay? So she's using projections based on facts that she has discovered through research. So those are really, really interesting uses of fact and opinion and directly addressing the audience. So what I want you to do now is you'll be given a speech to look at, and I want you to look for the same techniques. And don't worry, there will be boxes to help you, to guide you in your annotation of the speech. Good luck, folks.